I'm the director of the Minnesota Alumni Travel Program. I've been in my role since 2015, but the Alumni Association has partnered with Odysseys to offer great travel experiences to alumni and friends since 2011. During our time together today, we will give a brief overview of the Minnesota Alumni Travel Program and our relationship with Odysseys. Then Vinny, our guest from Odysseys, will address the topic of returning to travel and safety measures, as well as giving an overview of the upcoming tours. Before we get started with the presentation, I would like to thank our Alumni Association members and donors for making initiatives like the Alumni Webinar Series possible. If you are interested in learning more about the Alumni Association, visit us at umnalumni.org/membership. The Minnesota Alumni Market is an online store that sells products made by alumni-owned businesses. Not only is it a great way to support both alumni entrepreneurs and the UMAA, but they sell great products as well. Get outfitted for your next trip at mnalumnimarket.com. Okay, we do have several other webinars coming up in our travel series, including the 3 you see here. You can learn more and register at umnalumni.org/events. Next, I am going to go through some housekeeping information. So participants are welcome to ask questions. I will be monitoring the Q&A while our presenter is speaking. Please use the Q&A button to submit your questions, and we'll do our best to address all questions before our time is up today. And if you'd like to listen via phone, you can dial 646-558-8658 and then enter the webinar ID, which is 927-4222-3092. The Minnesota Alumni Travel Program offers more than 40 destinations annually and gives you the opportunity to explore amazing locations all around the world with alumni and friends. We have our 2021 and 2022 tours listed on our website at umnalumni.org/travel. And you can contact me anytime with travel program questions at umtravel@umn.edu. Now, for those not familiar with the Alumni Travel Program, in a typical year, we have about 500 alumni and friends joining us on tours both domestically and internationally. Our destinations include every continent and all different modes of travel, including small group land tours, river cruises, small and mid-sized ocean cruises, and even some train journeys. We work with 8 tour providers who specialize in alumni group travel to offer curated, educational, and engaging experiences where all the details are expertly taken care of for you. The average number of Minnesota alumni and friends on each trip is 10, with some tours exclusive to our travelers, while other tours offer the opportunity to travel with alumni and friends from other university groups as well. And as I mentioned, we have been working with Odysseys Unlimited since 2011 and have received wonderful feedback from travelers and our hosts who have traveled on these tours. Odysseys Unlimited is a leader in high quality, affordable small group travel. And by limiting tours to just 12 to 24 guests, they provide an intimate, authentic travel experience with a high level of personal service. These small group tours allow guests to stay in unique accommodations and to experience one-on-one cultural encounters. Minnesota Alumni Travel currently partners with Odysseys for small group, mostly longer duration adventures by land and some land-river cruise combination tours. Many of the departures are exclusive to Minnesota alumni travelers, and some are shared departures with one other alumni association. Personally, I've experienced Odysseys tours in China and Portugal and can attest to their top-notch guides, seamless planning and organization, as well as special experiences that have really wowed our groups. For the remainder of 2021 and through 2022, we have 12 tours planned with Odysseys Unlimited, but I'll let Vinny get into introducing those. And the pictures you see here on this slide are my pictures from past tours with Odysseys. You'll see some China and Tibet and Portugal there. Some great memories. Okay, now I have some audience poll questions. So just bear with me while I get the poll up, and everyone is welcome to please participate. So the first question is, have you traveled with the Minnesota Alumni Travel Program before? No, not yet. Yes, once, or yes, more than once. I'll give everyone a couple moments to respond. Okay, I'll close out the poll in just a second here. Thank you all for responding. So we see that 41% said no, not yet. 37% said yes, once, and 22% have traveled with us more than once. Okay, and we'll go to our second poll now. Second poll is, have you traveled with Odysseys Unlimited before? The options are no, not yet, yes, once, and yes, more than once. Okay, we'll close out the poll in a second here. And our results are 59% said no, not yet, and 26% have traveled with Odysseys once, and 15% have traveled with Odysseys more than once. Okay, I have one final poll question. And that is about your travel plans. Are you planning to travel in 2021, 22, 23, or not sure about your travel plans? Okay, we'll close out the poll in a second here. All right, so we had 21% saying they will be traveling in 2021, and 22 was 43%. So majority here are planning on traveling in 2022. And then in 2023, 4%, and then 32% not sure, no plans currently. Thank you all so much for answering our poll. Okay. All right, now I will introduce Vinny Warna, who is the Manager of Special Interest Groups at Odysseys Unlimited. And Vinny has been in the travel industry for 28 years, 14 of which have been with Odysseys Unlimited. And he has a background that is very diverse in customer service, operations, and nonprofit management. And he has worked to develop the groups division of Odysseys, which currently works with more than 75 alumni organizations, museums, and other nonprofit institutions. Well, thank you, Vinny, for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Audra, can you see and hear me?
Yes, looks like we can.
Well, it's great to see you as well. And thank you very much for the invite to this event today. Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Vinny Warna from Odysseys Unlimited. We are a motor coach tour operator specializing in small groups of 12 to 24 guests. And as Audra mentioned, we've been working with the University of Minnesota since 2011, and for almost a decade, we've been bringing travelers to all parts of the globe, and we hope to continue to meet your travel needs in the future. Now, today I'll be discussing many trips, a couple for later this year. The majority will be in 2022. However, before we actually get to those destinations, we actually need to spend a little bit of time talking about a return to travel. What will travel look like due to the pandemic? And I know this question has been on everyone's mind, wanting to travel. And I'll do my best to answer any questions that you have and to present you with as much information as possible. Now, Odysseys couldn't consider a return to travel until several factors were met. Number one, the level 4 do not travel ban imposed by the US State Department had to be lifted, and it has been lifted. Number two, the countries that we visited or visit, their borders need to be open to US citizens, as well as their restrictions such as quarantines and lockdowns need to be lifted. We've started to see that happen with some countries, and we anticipate that this will continue to occur on a rolling basis. Number three, an effective vaccine that's widely available to all US citizens needed to be developed. And we've seen that there's been a vaccine rollout over the past few months. Number four, in 2020, when Odysseys realized that a return to travel would not be an easy one, it would be slow and a multifaceted approach, we decided to develop health and safety protocols designed to protect our travelers as well as our on-tour staff. And finally, we need to know that guests are ready to book again. Are the travelers feeling comfortable to make their reservations at this stage? And I can report that over the past 2 months, we've seen a good uptick in bookings for later this year, and in particular for 2022. Now, based on all of that, we feel comfortable at this time to re-engage and to begin operating our trips. Now, before the event, today's event, I know Audra reached out to you and asked if you had any questions that I could answer for you that would help in your decision-making process about travel. So Audra, if we could head to the next slide, we can take a look at some of those questions. Great, thank you. Number one, have you operated any tours recently? Well, I'm happy to report that as of next week, we'll be operating our very first trip in well over a year. We'll be traveling to the national parks of the Southwest in Arizona. All the health and safety protocols are in place. The guests have been briefed, and we are ready to operate the trip. And then following in May and June, we have several departures to Peru, Ecuador, Iceland, and other domestic locales. Continuing on in July and August, we're hopeful that Europe will begin easing restrictions and opening their borders to US citizens. And we anticipate that by this fall, a good number of countries will have reopened. And we hope that by 2022, we should return to somewhat normal travel levels. The second question, what will group travel look like in the future? I'm actually going to hold on this question because I have some slides coming up that will help answer this question in detail. When will other countries open their borders? Well, as I've mentioned, right now, Peru and Ecuador are open. Iceland is currently open to US travelers. Other countries include Turkey. Israel is expected to open their borders in May, and many of the safari destinations throughout Africa are currently allowing US citizens. And as we anticipate the summer occurring, we should see countries begin opening their borders on a rolling basis. And as we head into the fall, again, we're anticipating even more countries opening their borders. The other two questions, will I need to be vaccinated in order to participate on an Odysseys tour? And will the same safety protocols currently used here in the States be required when traveling abroad? I'm actually going to hold on those questions because I'll go over them in detail in the upcoming slides. There were a couple of last-minute questions that I did not have an opportunity to put on this slide. What are the guarantees of money refunds? Well, when you book on an Odysseys trip, you're required to put down a $500 per person deposit. That deposit will be fully refundable if you cancel up to 95 days prior to departure. What we're trying to do is alleviate any financial concerns guests have due to the uncertainty of the pandemic. So as long as you cancel for any reason up to 95 days before departure, you can get your $500 per person deposit back. Once we get to 95 days, your full payment is required and cancellation fees do apply within 95 days. That's why we're strongly encouraging that you purchase optional travel insurance to cover your investment for cancellation within 95 days. But we'll get into insurance, and I know Audra will be talking about insurance a little bit more later. The last question, part comment, part question that we received is, I think that group travel of this type, for example, cruises, should wait until 2023. Am I wrong? With Odysseys, we're dealing with much smaller groups than normal cruises of hundreds to thousands of people. We're creating a small bubble of 12 to 24 guests, and we feel that we can travel safely and provide a safe travel environment. With the recent vaccine rollout and with the implementation of our health and safety protocols, we feel that we can create that safety net. And as we prepare to travel, we're going to give the guests as much information as possible about what to expect when travel resumes, and then they can make their own determination based on their own comfort level and their own travel needs. So let's go to the next slide, please, Audra. And we can take a look at the health and safety protocols.
There was just another late question.
Sure.
And I think you'll probably address this when you get into the destination specific slides, but it was, what is the status of 2021 tours scheduled for this fall? Did you want to wait and address that one?
No, we can answer it now. I mean, right now, for instance, one of the first trips I'll be talking about is to South Africa. And right now, South Africa is open to US citizens. You know, we continue to monitor this. Information changes constantly, but you know, as we get deeper into the year, we anticipate that more and more travel will open up, particularly this fall.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Here we go.
Okay, so here are the health and safety protocols that we've created over the past year. I've broken this section up into 3 parts: what occurs prior to departure, while you're on the tour, and then after the trip. So all guests traveling with Odysseys will either be required to be fully vaccinated or to produce a negative COVID test taken no more than 4 days prior to your arrival on tour. Now, that said, the country that you're traveling to may have their own entry requirements, such as some countries may require you to be fully vaccinated. Should that be the case, then a negative COVID test will not suffice. You'll need to be fully vaccinated. If the country you're going to does require full vaccination, we will let you know well ahead of time. A few months before the trip, a couple of things will happen. Number one, we're going to make the determination whether we can operate the trip. That'll be based on ground conditions. Have any new restrictions been implemented by the country, such as lockdown and quarantines? If we find that we cannot operate the trip, we will contact you. We'll see if you'd like to move to another departure or another tour in the future. And if that's not convenient, we'll provide you with a full refund. If we find that we can operate the trip, then your full payment is required at 95 days. And then we'll be sending you COVID travel related forms detailing all the health and safety protocols. You'll be required to read, to sign, and to send those forms back to Odysseys, and then to adhere to the health and safety protocols while you're on the tour. And then a few days before your arrival into the country, one of the Odysseys representatives will be reaching out to you to conduct a health screening. We'll be looking to find out if you've been exposed to anyone with COVID or if you've begun to develop any symptoms. And if we can go to the next slide, Audra, we'll look at what occurs while we're on the trip. If you want to take a minute just to take a look at all the various guidelines that we have, you'll see that these guidelines are basically what we're doing here in the States. These are CDC guidelines that we'll be implementing on the trip. So like here in the States, face coverings, masks will be required at all times. We're asking our guests to bring a good supply of masks with them. They'll be required at airports, on the airplanes, motor coaches, if we're using a boat or yacht. At the sightseeing, they'll be required, hotel common areas, and going to the restaurant. And then your tour director, upon your arrival and then following every morning, will be taking your temperature using a contactless thermometer. Any guest registering a temperature of 100.4 will be asked to isolate and then to seek medical attention before safely returning to the tour. Every day, we'll also be asking guests to monitor their own health conditions and to report any COVID symptoms to the tour director. And because we're dealing with small groups, anywhere from 12 to 24 guests, we can comfortably separate you, physically distance you on the motor coaches. Where possible, we'll be using full-size motor coaches of 48 to 52 seaters, even for our small groups, and that will allow us to physically distance you on the motor coach. Hand sanitizer and hand washing. We'll be supplying plenty of hand sanitizer, and we'll ask before you get on the motor coach every time to use some hand sanitizer. Because this is group travel, we're asking you to be courteous of other guests, to cover your coughs and sneezes. Any guests that develop cold or flu-like symptoms will be asked to isolate and seek medical attention. And then the tour director every day will be conducting or will be reviewing ground conditions to determine the least busiest times that we can bring our guests to the site. So they'll be in a constant juggling act of moving the itinerary around to keep you safe. And finally, restaurants and hotels. The restaurants and hotels that we are using and have used for many years have been vetted for their cleanliness and for their sanitation practices. And you might find that some of the restaurants, hotels might conduct their own contactless temperature checks. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, we can talk about what happens after the trip. And actually, there's one bullet point that I did not put on here, but I will talk about it. I just checked the US State Department website. Returning guests or returning US citizens to the United States will be required to produce a negative COVID test a few days before their return to the United States. Odysseys Unlimited will help facilitate you getting the test a few days before you return to the States. Upon your return home, if you experience any COVID symptoms, we ask that you contact Odysseys as well as your physician, obviously. And by doing that, we can begin contact tracing with the other guests as well as the on-tour staff. I did mention optional travel insurance, and I know Audra will be covering this. Before the pandemic, we always recommended to guests to purchase optional travel insurance. If you canceled within 95 days, travel insurance would really be the only way that you could recoup lost funds due to cancellation penalties. But even more so now with COVID, we are strongly encouraging you to purchase some travel insurance. This will protect your investment in the thousands. It covers for tour cancellation due to injury and illness. COVID is a covered medical reason for many of these insurance plans. Protects also for travel delay, on tour out-of-pocket medical expenses, which can sometimes go into the thousands. And nowadays, we are hearing that some countries may require travelers upon their arrival to produce some form of proof that they have travel insurance. If the country or countries you're visiting with Odysseys require travel insurance, we will let you know ahead of time. So I encourage you to reach out to Audra, to reach out to the Alumni Association, as I do know that they offer their own insurance plan. Finally, communication. Communication for Odysseys has always been a critical component of our customer service. After you book with Odysseys, we will do our utmost to advise you about the latest information. This is a fluid situation. Information is constantly being updated. We'll contact you via email and phone to advise you about all the latest developments. So that is a look at return to travel. Before we actually get into the trips, Audra, are there any questions that have come up from the participants?
Yes, I think I see one here. Okay. So I have to pause the screen sharing to get to
Sure.
the Q&A for some reason. Sorry about the delay. Okay. Oh, somebody said, what if a guest has an allergy or a chronic cough?
That's a good question. Well, that information needs to be, divulged to Odysseys ahead of time. And by doing so, we can inform the tour director. So they'll have that information ahead of time. Is it just something that they're worried about what other participants will think? Are they going to be concerned? Is that what I'm kind of understanding?
Yeah, they didn't provide additional context in their question, but I'm assuming that's what they're concerned about, is that other
Mhm.
people might think that they are sick.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
Personally, when I eat certain things, it makes me cough, so I would worry about that too.
Life goes on and not everyone has COVID. People sneeze, people cough, and that's understandable. We'll let the tour director know. And if the guest is comfortable in telling other guests ahead of time, I have this allergy, don't be concerned. It's more of a personal decision too, but they shouldn't feel ostracized because they're coughing. And we certainly won't, make them feel like that. So people still sneeze, people still cough.
Yeah, I think everyone's just so um, concerned and heightened about those things now, and so
Very
it's
true.
understandable
Very
to be
true. Mhm.
concerned about that perception.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions about the health and safety portion from any participants? Feel free to use the Q&A button. Okay, well, we'll have another break for questions. So,
Great.
all right.
So we can actually move to the trips. It's not something we normally talk about, but because we're living in a pandemic world, it's a conversation we need to have about, what travel will look like. We want to be up as front as possible, but at this point, I think we can start talking about the destinations and kind of get excited about some of the destinations that I know many people have had on their bucket list. So
Yeah. Okay. Back to sharing the presentation. There we go. Okay, on to the fun part.
wonderful. Okay, well, this will be our first trip this fall with the University of Minnesota. We already have, I think, about 5 people booked on this particular trip. It's one of Odyssey's long-standing tours. It's called Southern Africa Odyssey, September the 23rd through October the 10th. It's an 18-day program, very comprehensive. Excuse me, features the countries of South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and the remote country of Namibia. The trip itself is part cultural exploration, part safari. So I'll pick out a couple of highlights that I think are really special. When we get to Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, you'll walk along the perimeter of the thunderous waterfalls and you'll take in the spray. While you're also in Victoria Falls, you'll have one of your first safaris and you'll go on safari for In Search of the Black Rhino. Chobe National Park has the largest concentration of elephants in all of Africa. That was one of my favorite destinations. I love elephants. And we're one of the few tour operators that actually goes to the country of Namibia. And that's what really makes this trip special, a 5-night stay in Namibia. As you can see in the top left-hand photo, those sand dunes are called Big Mama. And we'll be climbing along those sand dunes, some of the world's highest sand dunes. And we'll end the trip in Cape Town with visits to the Winelands region and the Cape of Good Hope. Now, all the prices that I'll quote you at the bottom are air inclusive from Minneapolis, and they're all based on double occupancy. So this trip for 18 days is $8,154 per person. So if we move to the next slide, that will bring us into 2022, our first trip for the year, Journey Through Vietnam. This is a comprehensive journey from north to south, Hanoi down to Ho Chi Minh City. 15 days. Some of the highlights include a day excursion out to Ha Long Bay. You can see that pictured there on the top left. You'll cruise along the 3,000 islands and islets. When you're in Da Nang, you'll have a 3-night stay in a beautiful resort overlooking China Beach. And then we'll take you down to the lifeblood of Vietnam, the Mekong Delta, where early in the morning you'll engage with the locals as they conduct their morning commerce in the famous floating markets. This trip is $44.97 per person. And then we're ready for next one. Great, thank you. Costa Rica's Natural Heritage, January the 17th through the 27th. This program is 11 days. And I'd also like to mention this program only takes a maximum of 18 travelers, so it's even less. January, great time of the year to leave the Minnesota cold, brutal winter and head down to the beautiful temperate climate of Costa Rica. We visit 4 distinct regions. We visit the Central Valley, the cloud forest, the rainforest, and the beautiful Pacific coastline. So on this trip, we'll visit the Irasu National Park, home of an active volcano. We'll take you to lots of botanical gardens. You'll meet with local elementary school children in one area. You'll go on a hanging bridges skywalk high above the canopy floor in the trees. And then you'll enjoy a 3-day beautiful Pacific Coast resort where you'll also take in a riverboat safari in search of the abundant wildlife. This trip is $41.81 per person. The next trip, this is, again, one of Odyssey's longest trips, or I should say long-standing trips. We've been operating this for over 15 years. It's called Mystical India. February the 24th through March the 12th. It's 17 days, and it features the golden triangle of Delhi, Jaipur, and Agra. But we've also added other visits, a 2-night stay at Ranthambore National Park, as well as a 3-night stay in India's holiest city called Varanasi. Some of the highlights include a 3-night stay in Jaipur, that's the capital of the Rajasthan region, where you'll tour the massive Amber Fort, pictured there in the top left. You'll go in search of the elusive Bengal tiger while you're on safari at Ranthambore National Park. You'll, of course, visit the iconic Taj Mahal, as well as the baby Taj Mahal. You'll have a cooking class as well in Agra. And then while in Varanasi, you'll see what the locals and the priests do during their morning and nightly rituals along the Ganges River. This 17-day program is $52.87 per person. Now we come to a big bucket list destination, Machu Picchu to the Galapagos Islands, March 29th through April the 13th. 16 days. We're basically taking 2 big bucket list destinations, the ruins, the Incan ruins of Machu Picchu, and the iconic wildlife of the Galapagos Islands. So this trip basically spends about a week in Peru. Some of the highlights include a stay in the Sacred Valley. This is where you'll begin acclimating to the high altitude. I'm sure you've heard about the high altitude in Peru. But while you're in the Sacred Valley, you'll visit many of the Indian villages and the locals, and you'll partake in an offering to the earth ceremony. You'll see other impressive Incan ruins, but the highlight here is a 2-day visit to the Incan fortress of Machu Picchu. We're actually also using the only hotel, the Belmond Sanctuary Hotel, that's right at the entrance of the ruins. That makes this trip even more special. After Peru, we head up to Ecuador. We land in the city of Quito. We meet our tour director there, and then we fly over to the Galapagos Islands. You'll be spending 4 nights on the island of Santa Cruz in a beautiful Highlands resort property. You'll have 2 to 3 days of private cruising on a yacht, and this trip is a maximum of 20 guests as well. You'll be taking in all the spectacular wildlife from the blue-footed boobies you can see pictured there in the top. You'll also see the famous giant tortoises, as well as frigate birds, marine iguanas, and the seals. This trip is $87.93 per person. Now we head over to Europe on a tour called Alpine Splendor. It's 14 days, May 16th through the 29th. We spend about a week in Switzerland and several days in Austria. We start in Lucerne, where we walk along the Chapel Bridge, pictured on the top left. We also see the famous Lion Monument. We'll ascend to Mount Pilatus in that top right photo using a cog railway. You'll take the famous Glacier Express down to the ski resort in Zermatt, where you'll spend 2 nights. You'll then take another train bound for the Gornergrat mountain range, where you'll have spectacular views of the Matterhorn. We then go to Lake Lugano, see other beautiful, quaint villages, and then we head into Austria, spending a couple of days in the Innsbruck region, touring medieval Innsbruck, musical Salzburg, and then we have an opportunity to go to Eagle's Nest. This trip is $59.92 per person. Continuing on in Western Europe, we have provincial French countryside. June the 6th through the 20th, this program is 15 days. It focuses on the western half of France. We begin in the southern city of Toulouse, where you'll tour the medieval walls of Carcassonne. You'll also enjoy an afternoon cruise on the Dordogne River. As we head north into the Loire Valley, home of champagne and chateaus, you'll tour the most famous of the chateaus called Chenonceau. As you head into Normandy, you'll stop at the Gothic Mont Saint-Michel Abbey. We'll also see the Bayeux Tapestry commemorating the Norman invasion of 1066. We'll spend a day and a half touring the D-Day landing beaches. And then before reaching Paris for our final stay, we'll stop at Monet's home in Giverny to see his home and gardens. And this trip is $58.97 per person. And as we round out the summer, we have a trip called Journey Through Britain, August the 6th through the 19th, 14 days. This is a comprehensive journey of Great Britain in Scotland, England, and Wales. We begin in Scotland, in Edinburgh, where you'll tour the castle as well as visit Holyrood Palace, home to the Queen when she's in residence. Traveling down to the Lake District, this is where many famous poets created some of their masterpieces. You'll head into Snowdonia National Park in Wales, where some of the highest peaks in all of Great Britain exist. You'll spend a night in Stratford-upon-Avon, where you'll have the opportunity to tour Shakespeare's birthplace. And then before reaching London for our last 2 days, you'll tour medieval Stonehenge as well as Windsor Castle. This trip is $6,071 per person. Okay, this next trip, late summer into the fall, along Central Asia's Silk Road, September the 10th through the 26th. This is 17 days. This trip is fairly new. It's been out for a few years, and obviously because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to operate in a couple of years. But if you're looking for something different, if you've already done trips like Peru or Vietnam or Egypt, and you're looking for something a little bit more off the beaten path, something a little bit different, where not too many travelers have been, a little bit more adventurous, this might be the trip for you. We visit 3 countries, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and we spend 2/3 of the trip in Uzbekistan. This is home to many of the cities that were home to the Silk Roads. So this trip is all about the art, the architecture, the culture, and the religion of this region. When you're in Kyrgyzstan, you'll watch a family create their circular yurt homes. You'll also have spectacular mountain views. When we're in Kazakhstan, this is one of the world's largest landlocked nations, you'll visit some Russian Orthodox churches. And then once we get to Uzbekistan, we'll visit plenty of mosques and educational institutions called madrasas, home to one of the world's oldest copies of the Quran. And then finally, as we travel in Uzbekistan, you'll be traveling the ancient Silk Road route from Khiva to Bukhara to Samarkand, where you'll see many of the mosques and the incredible architecture, as well as the colorful bazaars and the folklore performances. And this trip is $7,094 per person. The next 2 trips are probably 2 of my favorite destinations. Audra and I had the opportunity to travel together on an educational trip to Portugal right before the pandemic, and we had a fabulous time, but this trip is wonderful. It's called Discovering Portugal, October the 9th through the 21st. It's 13 days. One of the reasons I love Portugal is because it's like an undiscovered country. It doesn't get as many tourists as, say, England or Italy. It's not as expensive, but you still have so much cultural charm and so much natural beauty. So the trip, one of the unique things about the trips, or about this particular trip, are the accommodations. We stay in what are called posadas. These are historic inns, such as a convent or a monastery or an old fortress that the government has turned into these beautiful cultural properties. So that really helps kind of immerse you into the culture of Portugal. But the touring begins in Lisbon, where you'll visit the Belém Tower. You'll also tour Jerónimos Monastery. Just north of Lisbon, you'll go to the fairy tale castle called Pina Palace. We'll head up to Oporto for a 3-night stay. This is home to port and wine. You'll have a port tasting there, and you'll have a leisurely cruise on the Douro River. Heading back south, before we get to Estremoz, you'll stop at Guimarães, which is considered the birthplace of Portugal, the university town of Coimbra, and you'll tour the medieval town of Évora with its Roman ruins. You'll finally end the trip on the coastline in the south called the Algarve, with the beautiful rugged coastline you can see on the top right photo. And this trip is $46.72 per person. Again, one of my favorite destinations. I've been to Egypt a couple of times. I can't wait to get back out there again. Egypt and the Eternal Nile, October the 31st through November the 14th. This program is 15 days. We cover all the classic sites you would expect to see in Egypt. So when you're in Cairo at the start of the trip, you'll of course visit the monumental pyramids of Giza and the Sphinx. We'll take you back to see the step pyramid of Saqqara. That's a precursor to the pyramids of Giza. We'll also take you to the first seat of one of the first pharaohs in the city of Memphis. You'll also do a classic Nile cruise, where you'll go up and down the Nile, seeing things like Karnak and Luxor Temple, as well as the burial chambers of the Valley of the Kings and Queens. What makes this particular trip special and what separates it from other tour operators is that we offer a second cruise on Lake Nasser. That's actually, you do a cruise on Lake Nasser before the Nile. Lake Nasser was created in the 1960s during the creation of the High Dam in Aswan. There are not many cruise ships on Lake Nasser, so it feels like you're stepping back in time. It's not like the Nile where there are hundreds of cruise ships going up and down the Nile. There's literally, I think, less than a dozen cruise ships on Lake Nasser. When you're on Lake Nasser, you'll be learning about the Nubian history of the area, as well as the temples that had to be rescued in the 1960s because of the flooding of the High Dam. So that really makes this trip special. We also visit Abu Simbel, which is in the southern part of Egypt, and it features the 4 massive 60-foot statues of Ramses. This trip is $53.97 per person, and I would like to mention we are offering Egypt with Minnesota this coming fall. The start date, I believe, is October the 25th. It's nearly sold out, and there might be 1 or 2 trips left. If you're interested in traveling this year, contact either the Alumni Association or contact Odysseys, and we'd be happy to give you more information. So if we go to the next slide, that will show us some information about reservations and information. If any of those trips interest you, or you'd like a little bit more information about Odysseys, about anything I covered today, please feel free to call us toll free at 888-370-6765. I also encourage you to go to the University Alumni Association's website. You can also click on the trip that interests you, and there'll be a flyer relating to that particular trip, which will provide even more detailed information. About 8 months before each trip, we'll be sending out either a brochure or you'll get a catalog. The requirements for booking a trip are $500 per person. And as I mentioned, that deposit is fully refundable up to 95 days prior to departure. That means if you book a trip now, for say you book the Silk Roads trip in September of next year, you put your deposit down. If for any reason you'd like to cancel between now and next June, for any reason, you can get your full deposit back. So that gives you the opportunity to get excited about a trip, get booked on a trip, and not have to worry about losing your money if you cancel. For forms of payment, we take all the major credit cards, American Express, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, or personal check. So that was information that I had about the trips, about what travel would look like in the future. So I know Audra has more information to share with you, but I want to thank you for listening today and for attending. And I want to leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Lord of the Rings author Tolkien, not all who wander are lost. Let's get back out there eventually again so we can continue our wanderings and our exploration of this incredible world. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vinny. So many great destinations. I know so many travelers are looking forward to getting back on the road and putting some plans in motion and getting back out and having adventures.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know I am. And I just am realizing, yes, Portugal was the last international destination I had visited. I was in Florida, I guess that February before everything shut down. But the last true international trip was Portugal. So wow.
Can't believe
Seems like a long time ago. Okay, well, we will take some more questions now. I see some questions coming in here. All right. Will the vaccine be required to travel to these destinations? Was a question, and I know you kind of addressed that, Vinny, but maybe you want to address that again.
Yeah, it's not an all size fits all. Each country is going to have their own entry requirements. When I looked for South Africa did not require a vaccine, but they required a negative COVID test. So if that's the case, you would not require a vaccine. You would just require a negative COVID test taken within a few days before your arrival. You know, as I said, this information is fluid. If that changes, we will let you know. But once you book with Odysseys, we'll provide you with all that information. But from what I'm understanding, when certain countries open in Europe, they may require a vaccine. Right now, travel to England is possible only unless you quarantine for 10 days, which is why we're not going there. But they might require, once they open up, they might require a vaccine. For instance, Iceland, you can travel to Iceland now as long as you're fully vaccinated. So each country is different, and we'll continue to monitor and update guests as they book.
Yeah, hopefully things will get easier and more transparent as we roll along, and different countries and destinations navigate.
That's right.
The process of welcoming people back in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have another health and safety related question. What is Odyssey's specific plan for handling a guest who comes down with a serious illness or injury? And then especially with a COVID-19 diagnosis. Presumably the country's requirements in which the tour takes place will need to be met, including that person's isolation and quarantine.
Correct. I mean, just even in the past when we've had to deal with someone's injury, if they required hospitalization, we would assist them with that. And then we would also have a rep. The tour moves on, but if the person needs to be hospitalized, we would reach out to family members if they needed assistance. If someone needs to be quarantined because of COVID, that is a possibility. As I mentioned, they would need to seek medical attention and would not be able to rejoin the group until a physician said it was safe to do so. But that's why we're also saying to make sure you purchase optional travel insurance, because the insurance carrier can act as your liaison between the hospital and the guest. So, I mean, it's a multifaceted question.
Yeah, certainly. Another question is, can a single person go on the trip? What is the financial implication?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we welcome everyone. We welcome single travelers and doubles. There are single supplements on each of the trips. That way, that ensures you have your own single room. Single supplements, it depends on the trip. For instance, that first trip to Southern Africa, the single supplement on that trip could be anywhere from $1,600 to $1,900. I'm not sure of the exact amount. Depending, where you're traveling, it could be $795, it could be $995. But we do welcome single travelers, but there is a supplement to secure your own room. Because everything is based on, all pricing in the travel industry is based on double occupancy.
Yes, and I will say that from the tours that we have, the cruises are going to be a higher single supplement cost than the land tours. So tours like these that Vinny is presenting aren't going to cost as much for a single traveler as like a cruise typically would. Certainly that's not true for every cruise out there, but that's the general rule. So
Yeah, on the land trips, we basically prorate the amount for the number of nights that you're staying in the hotels. That's why, I mean, it's not, yeah, it's not as high as cruising. The highest one would be on the Machu Picchu to the Galapagos, because that one does have 4 nights in the Galapagos Islands, and we're using some pretty unique accommodations that are in the deluxe category. That one is in the 25, that's about 2,600 for a single supplement, but that's the highest of the single supplements. I think some of the lower ones will be around 800 to 900.
Oh, you're right on, Vinny. I just looked up the Machu Picchu single supplement. It's $25.95.
All right, good.
Yeah. Yeah. So for example, Mystical India, I'm just pulling that one up next to compare. The trip cost is $52.87, and then the single supplement is $14.95.
And again, I mean, these are really, the hotels that we use are in the first class to deluxe category. And when we're going to these exotic locales like India, we tend to lean more on the superior first class to deluxe category. So that's why they might be a little bit pricier, but they're still reasonable.
Yeah. And I'll also add to that, yes, as far as the Alumni Association is concerned, single travelers are more than welcome. I've, seen in many different instances, different trips, different destinations, solo travelers going on the trip, and certainly engaging and blending in with the group who, may be couples, but we also have, sibling pairs going on trips together, sharing a room, or even going as singles separately. I've seen that with siblings or friends, either a couple of ladies or a couple of guys. So we have all different types of travelers. You don't have to be in a couple to go on the tours and feel not welcome if you're not in a couple by any means.
Mm-hmm.
So another question we had is, are upgrades available on the airfare?
For the majority of the trips, we do offer upgrades to either business class or to premium economy. The only one I believe we do not offer it to, because it's the destination is not too far, is Costa Rica. But for the other destinations, we do offer business class upgrades as well as premium economy. We'll have more information either in the flyers, or if you would like to reach out to that toll-free number, one of the travel counselors can actually go over specific pricing and if there are any restrictions and so forth.
Okay. And I see a question about the single cost for the Journey Through Britain trip, and that is $14.95 is the single supplement on that one.
Right. Yep.
And then we have a question about pricing as well. Does price include gratuity, taxes, and meals?
Okay. So what we normally include on an Odysseys Unlimited trip, so we include the round trip economy airfare from, for instance, Minneapolis or any of the cities in the States to the destination. We include the internal airfare within a country. So for instance, Silk Roads, Egypt, Vietnam, Machu Picchu, Galapagos, we have several flights within the itinerary. All those prices are included. We also include extensive sightseeing. We include all the entrance fees. We include about 75% of the meals. All the breakfasts are included, and then a good portion of the lunches and many of the dinners are included, but we'd like to leave out some dinners and lunches because we know that guests want to break away from the group and experience, the city or the town on their own. We also include luggage handling. We include tips, for the local guides, the coach drivers, airport and hotel porters. The only tips we do not include are that for the tour director, because we feel that's a personal decision. And also, if your trip includes a cruise component, we don't include tips for the shipboard personnel. But all the other tips are included. A good portion of the meals are included. And again, it's extensive sightseeing. Motor coach, you have first class motor coach travel and luggage handling. Yeah, it's a first class experience.
Yes, that is true. I can attest to that. Well, we have time for one more question. It is Odysseys considering tours to Europe or elsewhere, which would require everyone to be fully vaccinated in order to take the tour?
Well, I mean, we have a good portion of our itineraries are in Europe. At this time, only Iceland is open to travel, and they do require to be fully vaccinated. It's a question I really can't answer right now because many of the countries have not yet opened, but from what we're hearing, they may require, like I heard that Greece may be opening sometime to US tourists in May, and that you might be required to be fully vaccinated. So every country is different. As soon as we get that information, if you're booked with Odysseys, we will let you know if that country requires you to be fully vaccinated. So again, communication is key. We'll let you know every step of the way. As soon as we hear something, we will let you know.
Okay. So I just have a couple more things to mention. I'm just trying to get the screen sharing to work again. Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet. I can just see your picture.
Okay.
It's nice to see your picture, though.
Thank you. Something went away that should be here. Okay, well, that's okay. I'll just verbally say what is on the slide. So just wanted to close out by saying that, again, we encourage all travelers to consider purchasing travel insurance to protect both their investment in the trip and then also make sure that they have the health coverage that they need should anything happen while they're away from home. So our Alumni Association does have a insurance provider that we recommend, and it's USI, and they've been in business since 1973. And we've partnered with them since 2001 for alumni travel. So if you're planning a trip, I encourage you to just reach out to USI and get a quote for travel insurance. There's all different levels of insurance that you can take for different types of coverage, depending on what you're doing. So the website for that is www.travelinsure.com/UMN, or you can call them at 800-937-1387. And then finally, just wanted to say thank you everyone for joining us today. If you have additional questions, you can contact me or visit our website for more information. So the travel website again is umnalumni.org/travel. And then my email is umtravel@umn.edu. And finally, we will send out a survey about participating today. So we welcome your feedback. Thank you in advance for filling that out. And I'll also be sending out a recording of today's presentation. And I hope to see you at our next travel webinar on April 21st. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Audrey. Really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the attendees being here today, and hope they all feel confident in the future that we can all get back out to travel again, because that's why we're all here. It's our love of travel. So, but thank you again for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vinny, for joining us.
All right.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.